Welcome to the podcast. Today, we're diving into the concept of habeas corpus, that age-old legal safeguard that literally means you shall have the body.
Yep. So it protects any person, whether a citizen or not, from being unlawfully confined, right?
Exactly. It's been around since the 12th century in English law, and it played a crucial role in the development of, modern legal systems.
What really catches my attention is how it's been utilized in recent disputes, especially under the Trump administration, where lawsuits have challenged detentions and deportations.
Absolutely. For instance, the principle was central in cases involving non-citizen students, scholars, and humanitarian refugees. The legal idea is that if you're detained, the authorities have to literally bring you before a judge to justify that detention.
Right. It's interesting, how this ancient concept from the Magna Carta of 1215 still echoes in modern decisions and rulings. I mean, can you imagine a world without such a guard?
No, not really. It offers that necessary check against governmental overreach. Like, think of it as a built-in alarm system that ensures the rulers themselves aren't above the law.
Yeah, but then some critics might argue that in times of national security crises like post 9/11 or during wartime, this principle might clash with the need for swift action. What do you think about that?
That's a good point. However, the Supreme Court has consistently reaffirmed that habeas corpus is not just a relic, it's a vital right, even in severe security contexts. Remember the Hamdi case? The court made sure that even when someone is labeled an enemy combatant, they still have the right to challenge their detention.
Right? Hamdi is a hallmark case. And then there was the Rasool versus Bush case, which underlined that even non-citizens detained at Guantanamo Bay have this right. That's pretty groundbreaking if you think about it.
Yeah, it really is groundbreaking. It shows that the idea of civil liberty transcends both citizenship and geography. It's like saying, no matter who you are, the rule of law applies.
Right. And what's fascinating is how this centuries-old idea has adapted. Congress, back in 1789, empowered federal courts to issue writs of habeas corpus, and over time its usage expanded even further. It wasn't just about releasing prisoners, but also about challenging conditions of confinement and enforcement actions at multiple levels.
Exactly. And the law has extended it to scenarios like inappropriate pretrial conditions, child custody disputes, and even some cases of involuntary commitment. It's pretty versatile, isn't it?
Yep, quite versatile indeed. But I kind of wonder, don't you think there's a potential conflict when the principle is pitted against aggressive immigration policies? I mean, there could be like an overburdening of courts or delays that might hinder security measures.
That's a valid concern. However, the courts have generally struck a balance. The very fact that federal judges have even blocked certain deportations demonstrates that the legal system is profoundly committed to preventing unjust detention.
Right? It's like a safeguard that ensures administrative decisions don't trample fundamental rights. Do you think that this balance is robust enough in today's climate, given the contentious politics around immigration?
It's a tricky balance for sure. The principle of habeas corpus is straightforward in its aim, to protect against unlawful confinement, but the surrounding political pressures can complicate the execution. Still, the fact that it's being used to challenge, for instance, the rapid deportation procedures in recent years shows its resilience.
And then there's the historical suspension of habeas corpus at times, like during the Civil War under Lincoln or after Pearl Harbor. Those moments remind us that even critical safeguards can be overridden in extreme times.
True, although those suspensions were temporary and highly controversial. What's crucial is that habeas corpus wasn't permanently abandoned and has always bounced back as a pillar of rights protection.
Absolutely. Speaking of history, can you imagine how revolutionary it was for a 12th century law to cross over to America and shape like modern due process rights? That's wild.
Yeah, it's like a timeless blueprint for liberty. The transition from enforcing the king's will to protecting individuals against governmental overreach is just like a huge leap in legal philosophy.
Definitely. And it's not just theoretical, there's real world impact, like the Supreme Court's recent rulings that specifically challenged detentions and deportations under the Trump administration. That really underscores how applicable habeas corpus remains, don't you think?
For sure, it's the kind of legal check that ensures everyone, regardless of status, gets a fair chance to challenge their detention. It's as if the law is saying no shortcuts when it comes to liberty.
Absolutely. And then we have the legal tradition of allowing appeals and new trials or dismissals of charges based on habeas corpus petitions. It's impressive how it can even prompt actions like providing legal counsel or addressing inhumane detention conditions.
Exactly. It's not just about release, it's also about remedying systemic issues. The law here touches on ensuring due process in a very broad sense. Think about it. It applies to jail terms, immigration challenges, even cases of restrictive custody conditions.
Right. But some argue that by holding on to such an old legal principle, we might be, hindering modern security procedures. How do you see that playing out?
I get where that's coming from, but realistically, it's more of a framework that challenges overreach rather than an obstacle to security. It forces officials to justify their actions, which ultimately builds trust in the legal system.
I see that. It's like, yeah, regulations can be a bit of a hurdle sometimes, but they're crucial if you want to avoid potential abuses. I mean, without such safeguards, wouldn't we be left with too much governmental power?
Exactly. You could say that habeas corpus is the balance scale in the legal system. On one side, you have the authority of the state, and on the other, the rights of the individual. This balance, even when pressured, has historically tilted towards protecting liberty.
Right. And interestingly, this right isn't just a US phenomenon. It's echoed globally in various forms, isn't it? I mean, other countries have their own similar protections.
Yes, many democracies have adopted or adapted this concept. It's a testament to the universal appeal of the idea that no one should be, locked away without legal recourse.
Exactly. Now, one thing I've been mulling over, despite its central role in protections, habeas corpus is rarely suspended. It's almost like the courts have said, no, this is non-negotiable, except during truly extreme circumstances.
Precisely. And those rare suspensions, the ones during the Civil War or after Pearl Harbor, were accompanied by serious debates and were just as contentious as they were exceptional. It's that rarity of suspension that, in a way, highlights its sacred status in the legal realm.
True. I'd even dare say that the continued reliance on habeas corpus in our legal system, even amidst modern challenges like terrorism and complex immigration scenarios, shows its enduring strength. Would you agree?
I definitely would. It's almost like a legal immune system protecting our civil liberties. Even when political tides shift, habeas corpus stands firm as a check against abuse.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting, that habeas corpus challenges can lead to not only the release of an individual, but also sometimes systemic reforms, like changes in deportation processes or treatment of detainees.
That's right, because the process isn't just about one case. It's about enforcing the principle that the government must justify its actions consistently. It's a catalyst for broader accountability.
Absolutely. So, while some might critique its occasional challenges in national security contexts, the overwhelming consensus seems to be that habeas corpus is too critical a tool to ever be sidelined.
Exactly. It's an enduring, almost timeless watchdog of our rights, one that continues to remind us that freedom and accountability are foundational to our system.
Couldn't agree more. In a nutshell, from ancient Magna Carta roots to modern courtroom battles, habeas corpus stands as a pillar of civil liberty, a concept that, despite occasional political pressures, remains absolutely essential.
Yep, 1,000 years and counting. And whenever we reflect on its origins and applications, it just reinforces how fundamental it is that no one, regardless of status, should be deprived of their liberty without
No
due
doubt about that.
process.
Well, that was an engaging deep dive. Thanks for walking through the complexities of habeas corpus with me today.
Anytime. It's always exciting to explore how these ancient principles navigate the modern landscape. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, keep questioning and appreciating those legal safeguards that protect us all.